Tonight the topic of the talk is the life story of Buddha Gautama. I'd like to talk about this topic because there are a lot of misconceptions about our Buddha. So that's why it's good to talk about this topic, to know our teacher well. Now, our Buddha was born in a place in the northern part of India, and nowadays generally people agree that it is a place called Lumbini in Nepal. A few years ago there was some dispute between India and Nepal because India claimed that Buddha was born in India, but Nepal claimed that Buddha was born in Nepal. Now they generally agree that it was in Nepal, in a place called Lumbini, the foothills of the Himalayan range of mountains. And the Buddha's clan was the Sakyan clan. I think that most people know. And that was a warrior clan, or what we call the nobility, like blue blood. Now, a lot of people have been made to believe that the Buddha's father was a king. This is not true. The Buddha's father was not a king. The Buddha's father was one of the many people who belonged to the warrior caste or the warrior clan. Just like in Malaysia, there are a lot of Tungus and Rajas, but not all of them are sultans or agong, right? Sometimes you can even find a Tunku or Raja who's poor. So our Buddha's father was one of the many who belonged to the warrior caste. His father's name was Sudodana. Now maybe I'd like to elaborate a bit on this. What evidence do we have that the Buddha's father was not a king? Now in the Dhamma Sutta of the Majjhima Nikaya, we find that the king of Kosala by the name of Pasenadi, Raja Pasenadi, he came to see the Buddha when the Buddha was 80 years old. And this king was also 80 years old. And he paid great homage to the Buddha by bowing down to the Buddha and kissing the Buddha's feet. And the Buddha asked him, why do you pay so much homage to this body? Then he praised the Buddha. And that was what the sutta was about. Now in that sutta it is mentioned that the Buddha was a citizen of Kosala, just like this king. And we know that in the country there's only one king. So the king of the Buddha's country was this Pasenadi king, and not the Buddha's father. Sometimes people say the Buddha's father was the chief of the Sakyans. That also is not true, because in the Vinaya books we find that the chief of the Sakyans was a man by the name of Bhaddiya. And he was persuaded to renounce by his good friend Anuruddha, the famous Arahant Anuruddha. And he renounced. And within 1 year of his renouncing, this person, Bhaddiya, became an Arahant. We showed that he was a person with great what we call sankan, good roots, with many perfections of character. Now 7 days after the Buddha was born, his mother died, and we have this famous story that the Buddha, when the Buddha was born, his mother was standing and he was delivered, and after he was born, immediately after he was born, he took 7 steps. I took a few steps, and he proclaimed that he was a chief in the world. Nobody was superior to him. Now this kind of story is a bit hard to believe, even though it is found in the suttas. It is a bit hard to believe. Now, 7 days after the Buddha was born, his mother died, and his auntie, that is the mother's sister, took care of him like her own son. And these two sisters were the wives of this Buddha's father. So, but this stepmother by the name of Mahapajapati also had her own son by the name of Nandiya. So she took care of our Buddha and took care of her own son, both just like her very own son. In the Vinaya, the Buddha said that he had a very good life when he was young, because his father was richer, and his father built 3 mansions for him to stay for the 3 seasons, because in India there are 3 seasons: the rainy season, which lasts 4 months, the winter season, which lasts 4 months, and the summer season, which lasts 4 months. So on different seasons he would live in different mansions. And he said during the Vasa or rains season, for 4 months he will live in this mansion without coming down. And he was served by women. All women served him without a single man in that mansion. So he had a very good life. And in the Vinaya books, the Buddha also said that he was delicately nurtured. Very delicately nurtured, supremely delicately nurtured. In other words, what he was trying to say was he was not the kind of hero or macho that people try to make him out to be later. People like to depict the Buddha as a great warrior who could fight, he could shoot bow and arrow very well and all that, but that was not the case. So the Buddha said he was very delicate when he was young, and at a young age he married, and his wife was called Yasodhara. And the Buddha, because of his past cultivation, from young he was always unusual in the sense that he was different from other people, in the sense that even though he had such a good life, had a beautiful wife, a rich family, yet he was always troubled by this thought that the world is dukkha, the world is impermanent. And generally there's this saying that the Buddha saw 4 things that made him renounce. He saw a very old man, which made him think that one day also he will become old. He saw a very sick man by the roadside, which also reminded him that one day he will be very sick. And he saw a dead man or a corpse, which also reminded him that he was going to die one day. And the last one was he saw a monk, and this monk looked so serene that inspired him to renounce. Whether he saw one old man or more, or old man, sick man, or dead man, it might possibly be more. But anyway, he used to think about this subject of dukkha. And the reason why he used to think of it, we can find in a sutta, in the Majjhima Nikaya, or the Gattikara Sutta. Now in the Gattikara Sutta, it is mentioned that in a previous life, the Buddha was born as a Brahmin called Jotipala. And he had a very good friend, a poor man by the name of Gattikara, who was a pot maker. And this pot maker was a very strong supporter of the Buddha Kassapa. And Buddha Kassapa was the previous Buddha, one Buddha earlier than our Sakyamuni Buddha. So this Gatikara, being the chief supporter of the Buddha Kassapa, was an Anagami, a third fruit Arya. And he called his friend Dutipala, our Bodhisattva, to go and see the Buddha Kassapa many times. But this Dutipala refused until he had to pull him by the hair, drag him by the hair. Then only he decided to go. In fact, he was shocked that his friend dared to pull his hair, because Gatikara was a low caste person, and Dutipala as a Brahmin was a high caste person. So for a low caste person to pull a high caste person by the hair is really haram. Not something that is allowed. In fact, if the Brahmin complained to his clan, probably they might kill this man. So he was shocked. So he asked his friend, "You dare to do up to this stage?" His friend said, "Yes." Then he said, "Is it that important to see your teacher?" And Gatikara said, "Yes." So then only he went. So when he went to see the Buddha Kassapa, his friend Gatikara paid homage, bowed to the Buddha and sat one side. But he refused to bow. He just said hello, hello, and sat down. This goes to show that this story about the Buddha making a vow in the past life has no basis. Because if he had actually made a vow, it is useless, because he would have already forgotten, right? Just like in previous life we made any vow, do you remember? You don't remember a single thing about our previous life. How can you remember your vow? So even asked him to go and see a Buddha, also he refused to go. So it shows that this making a vow, this story has totally no basis. So after he saw the Buddha, his friend Gatikara told the Buddha Kassapa, he said, "Bhagava, this is my good friend Dutipala, and he's a Brahmin. Please teach him some Dhamma out of compassion." So the Buddha, out of compassion, taught some Dhamma to Dutipala, our Bodhisattva. And after hearing the Dhamma, he changed completely. He understood the Dhamma. So when he left, he paid homage to the Buddha, and the right hand towards the Buddha he left. Then after he left with his friend Gatikara, he asked his friend Gatikara, he said, "Gatikara, now we have an Arahant, Sammasambuddha in the world. Why don't you read?" So Gatikara said, "You know, my parents are old and blind. I have to take care of them. That's why I haven't renounced." And Dutipala said, "In that case, I will renounce." So in that life, you see, just hearing the Dhamma, he turned in the opposite direction, had so much faith in the Buddha Kassapa to the extent of immediately renouncing under the Buddha Kassapa. That kind of person is definitely a Sotapanna, a person who, upon hearing the Dhamma, has understood the Dhamma. And in our suttas and Vinaya, the Buddha says that kind of person has attained the vision of Dhamma, Fayen. And this means attaining the first path, Arya. And the Buddha says that before he dies, he will definitely, first path Arya will definitely attain the first fruit before he dies. So at that life, our Buddha, at that time of hearing the Dhamma, he must have attained the first path. And then as a monk, he practiced under the Buddha Kassapa and attained at least the first jhana. Because we know from the suttas, after that lifetime he died and passed away and was reborn in the Tusita heaven. And coming down from the Tusita heaven, he came as a last life before he became a Buddha. So in the last life, the Buddha mentioned that when he was very young, and his father was supervising the workers in the field, he sat under the jambu tree and he attained the first jhana. Nobody taught him. He just sat under the jambu tree and attained the first jhana, which shows that in his previous life, as a human being, he had already attained at least the first jhana. So it is very probable that in that life, as a monk under Buddha Kassapa, he should have become a Sakadagamin, a second fruit Arya. Because Sakadagamin, the meaning of the word Sakadagamin means once returner. He will come back only one more time as a human being and enter Nibbana. So that is why we can understand why when the Buddha in his last life, even though he had such a good life, yet he was always thinking of dukkha, because he was a Sakadagamin. And a Sakadagamin is like a ripe durian, doesn't need the wind to bring it down. No wind also is ripe enough, it will fall by itself, the durian. So this kind of person is bound to enter Nibbana. Whether there is a teacher or there is no teacher, he will struggle and enter Nibbana. So we can understand from here why when the Buddha, his wife gave birth to a son, he said, what in Malaysians will say, alamak, son is born. So he called his son Rahula. Rahula is like a bond, something to tie him down. Soon after the son was born, he decided to leave because he thought if he stay back, he will have to carry out his duty as a father to bring up his son. So at that point, he renounced. Now in the suttas, in the Majjhima Nikaya, it is stated that the Buddha renounced in front of his parents. Whereas the legend, the story about the Buddha is normally we know is that he took a last look at his wife and his sleeping child, and then in the middle of the night he stole away. But that would have been like a coward, isn't it? But no, our Buddha in front of his parents, he told them he was leaving, and then they cried and they pleaded with him to stay back. Then in front of them, he cut off his hair, put on a yellow cloth, and walked away. So after leaving, he looked for a teacher, and the first teacher he went to was a man called Alara Kalama. This was a very famous renunciant at that time, because he could attain the highest arupa jhana, formless jhana. That means absorption, meditative absorption on a formless object. He had attained the base of nothingness. And the Buddha learned under him and also attained this arupa jhana. And after the Buddha attained this base of nothingness, this arupa jhana, Alara Kalama offered our Bodhisattva to be co-leader with him, to share in teaching the others. But our Buddha realized that only jhana by itself is not going to attain enlightenment. So he decided to leave because he was looking for enlightenment. He was looking for the ultimate because he was already a Sakadagamin, as I mentioned. So he was looking for a way to enter Nibbana. So since this teacher could not teach him how to enter and all his suffering, he left him. Then he went to another famous teacher by the name of Uddaka Ramaputta. Uddaka Ramaputta was another teacher who could attain formless jhana, arupa jhana. He attained the highest formless jhana, which is the base of neither perception nor non-perception. That kind of state is where it's called neither perception nor non-perception, because the perception is like a flame about to go off, like a candle. The flame is so small, about to go off. So sometimes there is perception, sometimes there is no perception. It's like sometimes there is consciousness, sometimes there is no consciousness. It's like the flame of consciousness about to blow off. After he attained this state, he told his teacher, and his teacher, being I suppose very old, told him to take over his place. His teacher wanted to retire. But he also was not interested to become a teacher. Also, he left him. Then after leaving these two famous teachers, he went about on his own. And he tried his own way to find an end to all suffering. One of the ways was he thought, while we are living, we have this body, and this body gives us a lot of suffering. So we are living because we continue to breathe. So he decided to stop breathing. So when he stopped breathing, slowly, the pain started to develop in his head, in his body. And the pain in his head, he continued to stop breathing. The pain was intense. He said like somebody put something very tight around his head and tightened this bond around his head until he felt the head drop and all that. And still he could stand it. Why was his will so strong? Because he had attained jhana. If a person has attained jhana, the mind is very strong. So he could force himself to stop breathing. And then the body started to hurt. He said his stomach was as though somebody took a knife and cut his stomach. And yet he continued to stop breathing. And then, if you continue to stop breathing after some time, you are starting to die. So the devas, these heavenly beings, saw him, so they came to see. So one deva said, oh, this ascetic is dead. Then another deva said, oh, this ascetic is not dead, but he's dying. Then another will pass this kind of comments. He's not dead, but he's dying. Then another will pass this kind of comments. Then another deva said, we are not going to allow him to die. If he continues like this, we are going to inject heavenly food into his body to make him live. So because he had attained this arupa jhana, he could hear what they were saying. You could probably see them also. Because in the suttas it's mentioned, if a person has attained the 4 jhanas, or any of the arupa jhanas, he can see devas and can talk to devas. Not all of them, but many of them. So he, when he heard that they were not going to allow him to die, then he stopped. He stopped this exercise. Then he thought of some other way. Then he thought, much of our suffering is due to the thinking mind. If we continue to think, this mind gives us a lot of suffering. So he thought he's going to use his mind power to crush his mind. Don't allow his mind to think at all. So because his mind was so strong, he used his mind power to bend his mind into not thinking. And even he tried to do that, he did not succeed. But so he stopped it. But I suppose there are some people, external ascetics, who do this and succeed. Because there is a place in the 4th jhana heavens, a place where the beings are called asanya satta. That means beings without perception. Which also means that they are beings without consciousness, because consciousness and perception and feeling come together. So those beings have a big body, but no consciousness. And after a very, very long time, then they pass away from there. So maybe those are external ascetics who use their mind power. That means they have at least attained the 4 jhanas. That's why they are born in the 4 jhana plane. To crush their mind until they stop thinking completely and their consciousness stops. So after that, he saw a lot of ascetics practicing these austerities, these penances. So he also followed them, like going about naked. India is a place, during the day it can be extremely hot, but during the night it is extremely cold. So he was suffering, but he said that like in the night his teeth will be chattering, and yet he continued this practice. Daytime he will expose himself to the hot sun. And then another ascetic practice he did was plucking the hair. Instead of shaving the head, every time the hair grew up, he plucked. When you pluck your hair, very painful, Even one hair is so painful. pluck all of his hair. And then sleeping on nails, this yogis practice sleeping on a bed of nails. Then wearing different kinds of clothing, wearing bark skin, using the tree barks as a clothing, using feathers, bird feathers, etc. As a clothing, using hair, human hair. Where to get human hair? Probably must have taken off the corpses and knit them together to make a robe. But he said, you using human hair, very susah. I said, why? It's very hot and then very smelly. And then he'll do this practice of standing 24 hours, never lying down, never sitting, continue to stand, So imagine all your blood goes down to your feet, so your feet also will swell. He continued to do that. And after that, he did one by one these ascetic practices, and then he found that it doesn't lead him to enlightenment. Then you give it up, try another one. And find it doesn't lead him to enlightenment, throw it away, try another one. Then, because he was doing all these kinds of ascetic practices, other people, lay people as well as other ascetics came to respect him. And slowly, he gathered a group of 5 disciples around him. These were his disciples. And then he did things like eating only a particular type of food, like a particular type of grain or grass, or eating only fruits in the forest that have fallen down, or eating roots, tree roots. And he also ate cow dung, cow dung and all that. Then he go into away from people. During the Buddha's days, when somebody has passed away, they don't bury him, they don't burn him. They throw the corpse into in the deep forest, kind of cemetery, and then there the animals will come and eat. So he went to this kind of place. There's plenty of bones, isn't it? He'll gather all the bones together to use as a pillow, and lie down and sleep on this pillow of bones. And then these cowboys, those boys who look after the cows, they come by, and then they see him sleeping down there. They come and disturb him and urinate on him, and then they take some twigs and poke his ears, poke his nose. But he didn't want his mind to be troubled. He was trying to cultivate upekkha, equanimity. So he didn't let any anger arise. Then later he wanted to avoid people. Go into the deep forest. If he saw anybody coming, he ran deeper into the forest. It's just like a wild deer. If you see a wild deer, the wild deer will run deeper into the forest. So he was just like that, avoided people, kept going further and further into the deep forest. Then, going back to eating, just now I mentioned, he ate this cow dung. That means you have to follow the cow. Wherever the cow went, you eat wet cow dung, dry cow dung, to the extent of even eating his own shit, So you can realize why the Buddha says women cannot become a Buddha. So you're lucky if women cannot become a Buddha. Then don't have to go through all that suffering like our Buddha. Then he ate less and less, less and less, until he said he ate 1 grain of rice a day. Or 1 sesame seed a day. So imagine he eats so little, he suffered from malnutrition, became so thin, he said his eyes sunk inside, then his hair dropped. Then he said he was basically a fair person, being from a noble family, but he said because of malnutrition, his skin turned dark, and when he rubbed his skin, the hair also fell off. And he said his ribs stood out, and his stomach went inside. So when he touched his stomach, he could touch his spine. We try to touch we press our stomach also cannot touch our spine. He could. And then he said he had no buttocks, sort of no flesh in his buttocks. So he said his buttocks was like what? He said camel's hoof or something. And his hands and his legs, he said, were like bamboo, bamboo, you get a knot, was like that, so thin. So because of eating so little, he became extremely weak. So one day he went to the stream to wash himself. He fell into the stream. When he fell into the stream, he was drinking the water in the stream. Probably it's not very much water, maybe a foot of water or less. But he was so weak, he couldn't push himself up. He couldn't do one push-up. So he was drowning in that water until a girl who was looking after the cows passed by and saw this renunciant struggling in the water, drowning in the water. Then she came and pulled him out of the water. Imagine he was so thin that it was not very difficult to carry him out of the water. And she put him under a tree. And then this lady gave him some milk rice to take. After he took some milk rice, then he felt better. Then he thought to himself, just now he nearly died. Then he realized that if he had died, it would have come to nothing. All his effort, so many years of struggling, come to nothing. So he realized that was not the way to go. Then he thought very hard, what is this way to get out of samsara, to get out of suffering, to be enlightened. Then he remembered when he was very young, under the jambu tree, he had attained jhana. Then he asked himself, is this the way? Then because he was a person who had attained jhana, his mind is rid of the 5 hindrances. So he could realize things, just by contemplating. Then he realized that this was the way to get enlightenment, was by using jhana. Then he asked himself, why didn't he use jhana earlier? Then he realized that he didn't use jhana earlier because jhana is such a blissful state. And then he thought, by enjoying yourself in bliss, you cannot attain enlightenment. That is what a lot of people think. That's why they go and do penance and do all these austerities. Then he realized this is not worldly happiness, This is different from worldly happiness. This is a very different state. So he realized that this was the way to go back to jhana. Then he thought to himself, his body is so weak, he was not able to enter jhana. So he realized that he had to take a meal every day. So he decided to take one solid meal every day. So when he did that, his 5 disciples left him. They thought he was going soft. No more fighting spirit. Last time could eat 1 sesame seed a day. Now he takes 1 whole bowl of rice. To them, they thought this is luxury. So they all left him, looked down on him. And he didn't bother with them. And he continued to struggle on.